Oh, yeah. I'm going to call to order the special Cinco de Mayo COVID edition of Town Council meeting. Roll call. Helen?
Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Mr. Carlton,
Here.
Mr. Bergeron,
Here.
Ms. Owens,
Here.
Mr. Kuhn,
Here.
Ms. Giello,
Here.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. All right. Agenda, Rick, everything that we see in front of us accurate at the moment?
Yes.
All right. Then we start with new business. The first piece we have tonight is Council Bill number 16, Series 2020. This is an emergency ordinance requiring face coverings during the coronavirus because of a public health emergency. Rick?
All right. Do we have Tim Berry on the call? Tim was involved in our the Trinity hearing that we had going on at Summit County, so he may still be doing that particular event. So let me jump into this. This is an emergency ordinance, which will take effect immediately and must be approved and adopted by at least 5 of you on this reading. So what this ordinance will do is requiring the wearing of a face mask in certain situations within the town. I just want to emphasize that this is already required, and really nothing new is happening other than our ability to say that we have a local ordinance that requires the same thing that's being required by the county. We have the same, that whenever they enter or inside of a place, business, and when they're in a public indoor outdoor place where they're unable to maintain that safe social distancing of 6 feet or more from others that's not of their household. And then there's some exceptions. People under 2, people who the face covering would cause an impairment due to existing health condition, or somebody working in a professional office by themselves that doesn't encounter anybody, no face-to-face interactions. They're exempt from it. So this would take effect immediately if adopted, and it would remain in place until such time as the mayor declares that the public health emergency is over. There is a penalty phase in here. It's a ticketable offense that the police could cite somebody if they were in violation, and the first offense would be $50, second $250, etc. So I just, you guys had a discussion. You were talking earlier. People run the full gamut on this one, right? There are going to be people out there that are going to want you to have the police giving people tickets. And then on the other hand, that's probably not the right thing for our police department to be doing. It does give them a tool to let people know that they are violating the law, and they could be subject to being cited if they don't come into compliance. But we already know that there is a group of people out there that are going to flat refuse to wear a mask. And this is not going to change their attitude.
So then what happens if they flat refuse to wear a mask? Like, I understand that businesses are starting to open and they're enforcing, I think that we're working on getting our business community excited about these guidelines and these rules. What happens if somebody's like, it's my freedom to go into the store. I'm going into the store.
Your freedom to go into the store without following the rules. So the store,
oh yeah, no, I understand.
The business has every right. I know the business has every right to not allow them to enter. And if they refuse to leave and abide by the rules, they can be trespassed from the business. And so then they elevate it to a different level.
So then a business owner would say, call a police officer, and the police officer would come and remove them, and they would be ticketed. I mean, if people refuse to wear a mask, then they'll be ticketed. Is that true?
Yeah, that's the discretion of the police department, certainly. But if a person enters a place of business and the store owner says, is there a reason that you're not wearing a mask? I would prefer that you wear a mask. And they say, I have a medical condition that will not allow me to wear a mask. At that time, they're following the rules and there's nothing you could do. If they say, I have no intention of wearing a mask, I think it's ridiculous, then the business owner could say, well, then I would prefer that you not be in the building. Would you please leave? And if they refuse, then they could call the police.
We have
Yeah,
the ordinance.
Aaron, this small business has the right to refuse service to anyone, provided it is not discriminatory against one of the protected classes of people. So, we can refuse it. I hope that we can get some messaging out, that Haley can maybe do a little campaign that basically just says, we understand people have the freedom to have different thoughts about this kind of thing, but please don't take it out on our workforce. If you have issues with this ordinance, feel free to express them to the 7 of us on council making the decision to pass the ordinance, or they could sue town if they want, but please don't go in to our small businesses up and down Main Street and take it out on people that are purely trying to make a living.
And that's my concern. That's exactly my concern is the hostility.
Do some messaging. I saw a piece Kyle Clark did on 9 News, and it was very well done. He basically said to those of you amateur Constitution analysts, please don't take your views out on the 19-year-old working behind the counter when you go in a store. He said it more eloquently than that, but it was very well said.
This is sort of where I've done a 180 on this thing. I really, at first, thought we should have our own mask ordinance. We should be pretty draconian about it. But really, in the end, this is going to come down to private businesses deciding what's best for their employees. That's really, in the end, if a guest doesn't feel that they need to be protected, but we feel that we need to protect our employees, that's what it's going to come down to. I don't know if us doing an emergency ordinance is going to change any of that dynamic. The police still will enforce the county's health regulation, correct, Rick?
Yeah, I do think it's easier to enforce and write a municipal ordinance into our court than the county.
My issue is that look, nobody in town, or I shouldn't say nobody, let me back up. There's a lot of people walking around town that do not have a mask anywhere on their person. A lot of them are not from here. A lot of them are just up and down Main Street right now, no mask. I don't know how we're going to handle this thing. I really got to tell you, I am just baffled. How many calls are we going to get about this? Because there's people on both sides of this discussion. There are people that think everybody should get a ticket if they're not wearing it because they're violating my civil rights by spreading germs. And then there's the opposite side. I'd really like to hear from everybody how you feel about, let's not enact an ordinance if we don't feel that we can truly enforce it. I guess is where I am. Gary?
Mute. Okay. I'm okay with the ordinance for the following reason. I think it allows people in a conversation to say to somebody doesn't have a mask on, if they do, well, by the way, do you know that the town of Breckenridge has an ordinance that you should be wearing a mask when you enter a store or a building? I just think it gives those folks just a little something extra in their conversation. I agree that enforcement, virtually will be, close to zero, because I really think what's going to happen is, we've already seen it in different places around the country. There's going to be some people on both sides of this issue that are going to get very, very angry, and it's going to, quite frankly, lead to some physical altercation. I think that's what we're going to see from time to time. So, but again, I think the ordinance doesn't hurt anything. I think it gives people who would like to use it to say, hey, by the way, you should be wearing a mask. That's the town's law. So that's where I am.
Thanks, Gary. Jeffrey?
Yeah, you know what? I'm with Gary in that. I don't know if it will make a huge amount of difference. There's two people that don't wear masks. Those that don't know, don't think of it, and those that know and want to make some sort of point about it. And there again, I don't see. I hope this doesn't lead to kind of a citizen confrontation type thing. I think it's just another enticement to let people know that at least 7 of us who are reasonable and have varying political and libertarian and whatever ideologies all agree that in the best case scenario being someone in a public spot, someone going into the post office, someone going into city markets, or in a walking down a main street that is crowded. There again, if I'm walking down Main Street at 6 in the morning and there's no one around, I'm not going to wear a mask. But if I am around other people, and there again, I've been social distancing, because of my personality. So I know I don't have it. But what I'm doing is just giving a shout out. Hey, we're all in this together. So yeah, I'm okay with this. I would caution citizenry not to take matters in their own hands. If you can ask nicely, and if someone's reasonable, maybe bring it up. But if you see someone that is just going to be a hard ass about it, don't go there, because it won't do any good. That's what they want. They want you to tell them to wear a mask so they can tell you it's against their constitutional rights. I will say one thing though. The definition of a mask says something about ear flaps or around your ears. And generally, I wear one of these things, a neck gaiter. And I don't know if that is that not going to be appropriate? I mean, Ellie likes it just for me to wear like this around the house.
You got to pull it up higher.
So that I would say that I would bring that up, and I'd say maybe we could amend that to any face covering that covers the nose and the mouth.
Fair enough. Aaron?
Yeah.
Are you ready, or you want me to go to something?
Yeah, I was just saying now I'm rereading that. If just to make sure that the nose and mouth are covered too, which it's not jumping out at me. Anyway, yeah, I'm for it. I do worry about enforcement. I don't feel entirely comfortable having an ordinance where we're saying, well, we might enforce it, we might not. So I guess I'd probably be more on the side of, if we pass this, we should enforce it. And yeah, I agree with everything else that's been said here. As we continue to open things up, I think it'll be a continual conversation of how this and what the enforcement looks like. Like if we open up buses, our bus drivers then in charge of saying, okay, you don't have a mask, you can't come on, that sort of thing. And that puts them in a different position of more than just a bus driver. It puts them into kind of a police area. So I'm a little uncomfortable with some of the areas, but at the same time, I believe in the ordinance. So I'm for it, but I'm also for, if we have an ordinance, we should enforce it.
Kelly?
Yep, I agree with everything that's been said. And frankly, I do find the county's information difficult to find. And I think that this mask ordinance, I mean, even rereading it, it's buried in there and not terribly clear. I think that a lot of people look at the town of Breck to see what they should be doing to get their information. So I think having a local ordinance is a really good idea just for the visibility factor. And I think, what my concern is that I want us to start opening with the best mitigation plan in place. And I do believe, after all the writing and, Amy Wineland at Public Health, I mean, she has stated over and over that masks will be helpful in curbing the transmission of this. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't pass this local ordinance. And then I think on a council meeting with who knows how many people are watching, I think to say just flat out that we're not really going to be enforcing this is a bit of a mistake. I would like I would like there to, at the very least, be police officers who are engaged on Main Street and ready to say, sorry, it's busy down here. You've got to have something over your nose and mouth. The boys all went to the rec center and used the skate park this weekend, and the lifeguard that was there was fantastic. As soon as he got there, he talked to everybody. Hey, we want to keep this open. We want to make sure that, this is a facility and everybody's safe using this facility, or as safe as we can provide. And I just thought that messaging was great, and people wanted to do what was safe. I know I agree with what you guys are saying. I think there are some people who are gonna not want to follow this, but I think there's a huge force behind this, like, be kind, we're all in this together. They like that message. People need each other right now. And I think we should really push that message, and then we should ask our police if they have the capacity to help us push that message out there and have a presence on Main Street.
Hey, can I make just one addendum there, amendment? Eric, I'm not saying that we shouldn't enforce it. I'm just saying it's just, like so many things, citizens buying in is going to be the best enforcement. I mean, and obviously we're not gonna Rodney King some guy that's not wearing a mask, but I do think, I totally agree with Kelly about, maybe, because we like to call it a police force, a community police force, they're our ambassadors. So I think store owners and the cops all have a role to play.
Dennis?
I like this ordinance, and I like it because it gives the business owner a chance to tell people this is what they'd like to see in their establishment, and this is what we'd like to see in our town. I wear a mask to show that I care about you, and I care about stopping the spread of this virus. I agree with Kelly that, and Rick will probably tell us, that this is not totally enforceable, but I would like to see us make a presence that says, we really want you to wear a mask. Will there be pushback? Absolutely.
And there was a comment, there was in the Q&A, somebody mentioned, I think it's a good idea to maybe add it to our messaging on the signs, like on the electronic signage. Somebody wrote in with that, and I think that could be good too.
I like that.
Dick?
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. I would just reiterate what Dennis said and you said, Eric, is it's a really important tool to those of us that are contemplating and starting to talk to our workforce about opening. A lot of these folks are a little nervous about it. And I think it gives the business owners a choice and a tool to, if they feel strongly, it helps to look after their team. So I'm in favor.
Very good. And we have a couple other things that we can, there's no reason that CSO can't have masks that the town has purchased to hand out to some people that didn't know, that obviously are not, being belligerent about it. And we got 3 Q&As. One of them is pretty much telling us we're violating their constitutional rights by making them wear a mask. I will tell you that as a business owner now, not as the mayor, as a business owner, I am going to require that you wear a mask to come into my business because I am worried about my employees. That's who I'm worried about. If you don't care enough about your health or your family's health, that's fine. That's fine. But I care about the people that work for me. I care about their families, and I care about my partners and their families. And that's why I'm going to require, whether the town does this or not, that you wear a mask when you come into my restaurant, or I don't let you in. And I think that's the stance that 99% of the businesses in this community will take. And we're just going to have to take that. There will be some people that, for some reason, don't believe that the 75,000 deaths that have occurred in this country in the last 8 weeks are real. We'll just have to deal with it. Okay. Anything else on that one?
Couple things, please. If we, first of all, neck gaiters are acceptable. We want to make that very clear. So,
can we write that in here?
Pardon?
Can we make sure that's written in here because that,
Well, I don't think you need to because the definition covers neck gaiters. We just need to remove, when we make a motion, we just need to remove section 4, B as in boy.
okay.
And then it'll be amended before it's signed. Because the definition is, you know, it's a uniform piece of material that securely covers a person's nose and mouth and remains affixed in place without the use of one's hand. So that's a gaiter. And yeah.
Fair enough.
You know, I just hope everyone who's watching this thing, I hope you all realize we know this is a pain in the neck. I mean, this is not something that we're psyched about, but I honestly think if we do it for a little bit, this could hasten the return of our business and our economy in our normal way of life. I mean, you know, I try not to go out because I hate to wear a mask because it makes me dizzy, you know, but just do it for a while and maybe we can get through this a little quicker.
We don't reopen if it's not for the mask. So we need to make sure that these go on our messaging boards at the ends of towns, like the person that Q'd and A'd. And, you know, we should also do a banner, the Main Street banner should say something, you know, wear a mask, it's the right thing to do and it's the law, or some, I don't know, some verbiage like that. So
Cover your snaz and pie hole.
I would also like to see us on the messaging boards, masks and 6 feet of distancing. I think both those things go hand in hand.
We have to get approval from CDOT on changing those messages and what we can put up there. So I have a note that we'll look at it.
I think we should do it anyway.
Hey, Eric, when are we getting masks? When's the town getting masks?
I don't, you know what, that's a discussion we have to, you know, I think have at some point during tonight's meeting, how the council feels about, you know, authorizing Rick to authorize one of, you know, his employees to find a distributor. And, you know, how many do we need? Do we need 50,000? Do we need 100,000? Because I think it's important that if we can, as a town, you know, buy and then sell to, you know, the lodging, retail, restaurant community at our cost. That'll save everybody money. So we do need.
Great idea. I'd love to.
So just today we got approved as a governmental agency, a governmental purchaser under Amazon via, you know, first responder status, which allows us to go in and like City of Wheat Ridge, and they purchase them for actually 39 cents, which are the, you know, approved ones, which is extremely low. A lot of vendors are selling them for $1 a mask out there. So I've instructed Scott Reed to purchase 12,000 of those right now. But, you know, the timing, they'll come in different spurts. So, and then the goal is we'll work with the BTO to try to redistribute those at cost to local businesses, because we can buy them cheaper than they can.
I know Eric mentioned it before, but what about hand sanitizer? How are we doing on that too? Same?
I think we should talk about, you know, buying bulk hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely. Because that's something that's hard to get a hold of.
Yeah, and I don't know, just because we'll see, we may not have any better luck on that one. So.
You know, I talked to.
I mean, we could.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I know like the Breck Distillery is making some. I don't know if they're making it in that type
Not
of quantity.
Not anymore, because
Oh.
they can't get the
Okay.
official. There's too much red tape for them to go through to sell that stuff as
Okay.
As an official hand sanitizer. So.
Okay.
Let's deal with this, and then under other, as we go through, we can talk about some of these other issues.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right. Why is this not working?
Do we have any more
Proclamation
Q&A?
in support of Mental Health Awareness Month.
No, we're gonna take a vote for the.
Oh, no, we're not. Oh, we're going to do that right now. Yeah, never mind. There's no night meeting.
Hey, there's a couple of questions that Eric wondered if you wanted to deal with them.
You know, I think there's some of these things we're going to the ordinance be revisited and reviewed once it is passed. I mean, we're going to revisit these things as the county, the county has a roadmap for recovery, and there's guidance that we are working on, the town's working on, trying to help the county work on, that will inform some of these timing pieces. I mean, I hope this is not too long. Here's the problem. As a community, we are going to use testing as a benchmark for how we move from phase to phase through the roadmap that the county has laid out. The problem is when we invite a bunch of people in the community that are not necessarily part of our testing schematic, it will skew everything. So we need to make sure that we come up with protocols that allow us to move positively through these steps without getting hung up all the time anytime there's another wave of people that come to town. That's why the mask thing is so important for everybody listening. That's the only way we get out of this. Otherwise, as a tourist community, we're going to shut down constantly until there's a vaccine. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. I did ask the assistant county manager today on our last call about separating the testing results for locals compared to the testing results for the tourist community. So if you've come to visit and you end up testing positive at the hospital, that shouldn't necessarily count against us if you haven't had a ton of contact. So there's some things to work through. How does it work when you go into a restaurant and eat? There is definitely guidance that we're going to work through with the county now. Restaurants aren't opening for a while, so we have time to get some of these things in place. You walk in with a mask, you deal with a waitress with a mask, but then you remove your mask when you eat and you put it back on. You know, if you need to talk to the wait person, whatever, there's a bunch of stuff. There is a great handbook from a restaurant group in Hong Kong called Black Sheep Restaurants. If you go to blacksheeprestaurants.com in Hong Kong and you download their COVID-19 handbook, it's really well done. It's the kind of thing that, as a restaurant community, we will probably look at something like that to forward to the county with some alterations for where we are. So, a lot of these things go hand in hand. And with all these questions, the whole thing for the mask is to keep you from sneezing on somebody else. It's not to protect yourself. If you don't clean your mask every day, that's your problem, not mine. It's really to prevent the spit that comes out of your mouth when you talk. That's what the mask is for.
Yeah, and also, I think that there's the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. I mean, I'm a big proponent of masks. If I'm on the bike path and there's no one around, I'm not going to wear a mask. When I get close to town and there's a bunch of people and families, I'll pull up my neck gaiter. I mean, I think it's common sense. And
the mask is if you cannot keep 6 foot of physical distance.
Exactly, yeah.
The train of thought with passing it in this community is that when you go into a business or you go into a lodging environment or you check in or you go into the restaurant, there is no way you can keep 6 foot of physical distance. That's the whole point. If you can keep distance, you don't have to wear the mask. End of story. That's how this is supposed to work. It's not rocket science, people. This is really not that big of a deal. Wearing a mask is not infringing on anybody's rights, honestly. So, is there a motion?
Yes, I move we pass Council Bill number 16, Series 2020, with the elimination of Section 4B and been read into the record.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further council discussion?
We're all in this together, people. Let's just get over this.
There is a motion. Is that it for comments? All right. Roll call, please.
Ms. Jello,
Yes.
Mr. Carlton,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron,
Yes.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. Okay. We're going to move on to proclamation, excuse me, proclamation in support of Mental Health Awareness Month. And this could not come at a better time. Rick?
Mayor and Council, the full month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I think that not only as us as a community, but certainly you as a council are supportive of the efforts and what we're trying to do and bringing awareness to mental health issues, certainly in light of the additional challenges that are going on and the stressors upon people with the pandemic. And so what we would ask is that you would read the proclamation and then just do a verbal vote in support of this proclamation as Mental Health Awareness Month for the town.
Do I need to read this?
You don't need to, but
You want me to, though? Is that what you're saying?
I think in the past we've done that, yeah.
All right. Welcome if you got them. Whereas 1 in 5 Americans will be affected by a mental health condition in their lifetime, and every American is affected or impacted through their friends and family. And whereas mental illness is one of the leading causes of disabilities in the United States, impacting both the person with the illness and those persons who care for and love the person afflicted. And whereas 57 million Americans have a mental disorder in any given year, but fewer than 40% of adults living with a mental illness and slightly more than 1/2 of youth 8 to 15 years of age with a mental illness received mental health services in the last year. And whereas, although mental illness impacts all people, many of those in lower income communities receive less care, poorer quality of care, and often lack access to culturally competent care, thereby resulting in mental health disparities. And whereas the town of Breckenridge acknowledges that when compared to other Colorado communities, the instances of substance abuse and mental health indicators is elevated in Summit County. And as a result, the town is concerned about the impacts of mental illness on the quality of life for our residents. And whereas nearly 2/3 of all people with a diagnosable mental illness do not receive mental health treatment due to stigma, lack of community-based resources, inadequate diagnosis or no diagnosis. And whereas there is a need to improve public awareness of mental illness and to strengthen local and national awareness so that all those with mental illness may receive adequate and appropriate treatment and support. And whereas access to mental health treatment and services is of paramount importance. And whereas there is a need to encourage primary care physicians to offer screenings, to partner with mental health care providers, to seek appropriate referrals to specialists, and to promote timely and accurate diagnoses of mental disorders. And whereas Mental Health Awareness Month is both a national and local commitment to reducing the stigma associated with mental illness, encouraging those living with mental health conditions to get the help they need, and affirming our pledge to ensure those who need help have access to the support, acceptance, and resources they deserve. And whereas during Mental Health Awareness Month, the town of Breckenridge recognizes those in our community living with mental illness and substance use disorders. We pledge support for those individuals and their families, and we reaffirm our commitment to ensuring people living with mental health conditions know they are not alone. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Eric Mamula, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2020 as Mental Health Awareness Month, and call upon all residents of Breckenridge to join me in supporting the aims and goals of this effort, adopted this 5th day of May 2020. Anybody got a problem with that?
No, I just want to echo Rick's comments that, you know, this quarantine's taken a toll on our youth. It's taken a toll on all of us. And, you know, we need to support each other. You know, we need to be kind. We need to encourage our youth to check on their friends and to reach out. And without the ability to gather and support each other, we really need to make extra efforts, and we really need to be extra vigilant. So this could not come at a more important time. And, you know, we need to recognize the loss and the tragedy that we've experienced in the last few weeks in our community.
Thank you, Dick. Well said. Anyone else?
Couldn't have said it any better than Dick.
Thank you.
No.
All right. And remember, everybody out there, that Building Hope is our connection to the mental health world. So if you do have a problem, buildinghopesummit.org great place to go and get some telehelp for now. And yeah, it's a great place to start if you don't have anybody to talk to. So with that being said, all in favor of the proclamation, say aye.
Aye.
I
All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you, everyone. We now move to some discussion items, beginning with small business grant update and recommendations.
So you should have all received the latest report that came out yesterday that shows a current status of where we're at with our business grant application. So it's estimated that, as of yesterday, we processed 207 applications totaling 632,000. There are 9 other ones in the pipeline that we believe will be funded, which could result in an additional 22,000. So we estimate that we will, be spending a little over 650,000 on this program. So we had a meeting with Gary and Dennis last Friday to discuss should there be a round 3 or how should we distribute the remaining funds, because we feel like at some point here we need to stop the applications and decide how we're going to kind of round this thing off. And Gary, maybe you want to kind of give a report of what the committee was thinking.
Okay, Rick. Yeah, I think what the task force ended up coalescing around was based upon the notion that what's happening with this, pandemic is clearly going to go on longer than perhaps we were all hopeful 2 months ago when we started our phase 1 and phase 2, thinking that, gee, maybe we all get lucky and things start to open up this summer a little bit. But I think it's pretty clear to all of us that that's not really going to be happening. And it's going to be sometime, later in the year at best, if we are able to, start opening more to start kind of getting our economy, working again. And so I guess what we all were thinking was that if we could provide a little more help within the $1 million cap to help our tenants and landlords to go just a little bit more to continue to demonstrate the town support for our local economy and our retailers on Main Street to maintain hopefully more rather than less, that they'll be able to reopen their businesses at the appropriate times. That we said, okay, why not give another 50% of what they have already gotten from the town as just, for some folks, it's not going to be enough. We recognize that. For some, it might just make the difference between holding on just a little bit longer with the money coming in from the feds, if there's additional tranches coming from the feds. So, anyhow, we didn't think that we should try to create new categories. I think at this point, we really want to keep this as streamlined as possible. Staff is on top of this, and if council feels comfortable moving in this direction, staff is ready to reach back out to everybody and get this done, very, very quickly. So I guess that really was what we talked about.
That's great. Thank you, Gary. How's everybody feel?
Yeah, I agree with Gary with the conclusion of the committee.
Dennis?
Yep, agreed.
Aaron?
In favor.
Dick?
And also, I know that there's a Q&A right now that's asking when will things open? And I think, to Gary's points, we don't know. I mean, it depends. I mean, this is why this conversation and the mask conversation go hand in hand. If people are diligent and stay well, hopefully we can open up. But again, it depends on how ICU is doing, how people are doing, if people are healthy, if people are not healthy. So unfortunately, we just don't know. when things will go back to normal.
There is some guidance on the Summit County website. So if you go to Summit County, Colorado, type that into the Google machine, find Summit County's page. There is a roadmap to recovery. There's a graphic that goes with it. There's some speed limit signs. They did some things that sort of make things make some sense. You need to look at that because that gives some windows of time. And if your wedding's going to be in August, it might give you some time to decide where we might be. There are no guarantees. Nobody knows how this thing is going to really roll. We could open and everything might be great, and that would be fantastic for everybody, and I'd be super psyched. Or we may hit some speed bumps, and this thing could be longer than we think. So other than that, we really cannot give anyone out there any guidance about when you should get married, where, how, what's going on. We do follow state guidance and we do follow county health guidance. So,
Yeah, Eric, and the other thing I think, we all recognize is, there's two ways to beat this virus. One is through a vaccine, and the other is through herd immunity. And it's really only those two ways that are going to beat this virus. And herd immunity is going to be, they say it's going to be 70% in that neighborhood. Vaccines, even if we had a vaccine in the next 12 or 18 months, that's good news, but they're going to have to produce billions and billions and billions of dosages. And that could, quite frankly, take another year or so. So I think we all have to be thinking that we could be in this for a long time coming, and notwithstanding a slow open and everything like that, to really get it under control.
Thanks, Gary. Other discussion about the adding on to the rent help, Dick?
Yeah, there's another piece to it I think we should discuss, and whether we do it now or we push it off to our budget discussion. But I think you guys saw the updates from Brianne from FERC. They are just about out of money for our workforce rent assistance, and may be out at this point. Our business community isn't anything without workforce. So, if we can't support the workforce and allow them to stay and live and feed themselves and their families and survive until we are open, and as to Gary's point, it is likely to be slow going for some time. The business is kind of dead in the water. So something I might throw out as a suggestion. I agree this needs to be wrapped up quickly. It needs to happen fast. What if we said we gave a 1-week deadline and people just need to send a simple email saying, yes, I need a half month's rent for May. Thank you. And just send it in to the committee as an application. Super simple, super easy. And what this does is, heaven forbid, but I'm afraid some have already decided that it's not going to work and they've thrown in the towel. I guess I'm concerned of just automatically sending out the check. So we ask them to send a simple email asking, and we do it for 1 week. I suspect that'll put us at about the 900,000 mark. We take 100,000 and we give it to FERC for workforce rent assistance, because that also supports our business community.
I think that's a good idea. I think just sending an email makes sense to ask for it. We shouldn't give money to people who aren't asking for it. So I think that makes sense. We're going to talk about the FERC after this, right? Because I have some questions and comments about that. Okay.
Gary, is Dick? Do you think is Dick's idea workable?
You asking?
Oh, I think it's entirely workable. We have to just, on one hand, you still have people lining up asking for individual rent assistance, the employees out there. And we're almost out of money and there's 109 people in the queue waiting. And I talked to Brianne today, and they're ready to start making phone calls to tell people that there's no more money. Sorry. And I said, well, give me till tomorrow morning to let you know if we can put some more money into the program to help some additional people out. So on one hand, we obviously met the needs of a bunch of businesses, but we still haven't met the needs of some of the individual renters out there. So I think you've been more than generous with 1.5 million. I'm not sure you have to go higher than that, but maybe you need to reallocate some of that 1 million and put it back over on rent relief for FERC, where the need is still great.
I'd be okay with that.
I like the idea of sending an email out. I think if we crafted the email to say that we are spending down the funds and we want to determine if they have a need for a half month rent, or if they would prefer to see that money used for some individual employee rent assistance. And
That's
so I think some
perfect.
businesses will say, it's tough, but I've worked some things out with my landlord, and let's put it towards the employees.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to do, though, instead of waiting a week, because I don't want FERC to have to tell people, I'd like you to commit, $100,000 right now, thinking that it'll probably be there. But if for some reason it's not, we would just pony it up somewhere.
I think we really have to do that because, we're talking about the mental health crisis that we're in, and just leaving FERC without the additional money for the people who've been waiting in line for a month, 6 weeks, just does not sit well with me at all.
Yeah, I agree with that comment, Kelly. I agree.
I agree. Am I missing something? Was there a report from FERC aside from what Dick sent?
Yeah.
Have we received reports from FERC about our funding?
Yeah.
It was
Did I-
attached. It was an attachment to what Dick sent.
Well, and then Shannon sent it out as
But what about
Oh, maybe
Shan-
it was Shannon's. Tannen.
Well, I see the one for businesses because the thing is that with what Dick sent, I see how it's saying that it's running out of money, but I also am seeing a table where it says that only 200 of the 200, like 200,000 is still there or something.
Not anymore. So you should have got
Okay.
one there's one day Friday, May 1st.
From
That
Shannon.
shows that
It was an
From
attachment
Shannon?
to Shannon, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, when she sends those daily reports,
It was an attachment.
It's an attachment, yeah.
But to sum it up, Aaron, it basically says they are out of money any day, probably today. And so they are desperate for the money. I love Rick's idea to commit and get them a check tomorrow so they don't have to make those brutal calls to say sorry.
And to Rick's
What?
point, I believe it's a psychological stimulus now.
Yep.
Let's help it.
I mean, we've done 300, as of Friday, Aaron, 381 households were assisted out of Breckenridge. The next highest number is Frisco at 77.
Wow.
At Friday, we only had $90,000 left. And then some of them, and they suspect, they're still average around $970 per household is the average assistance. So pretty close to 1,000 per application. They probably would need right now, just to finish up what's in the queue, they estimate about 50 grand. And that doesn't count, if some other ones are still coming in. So I think right now 100 will give us a cushion, and then, we'll reevaluate in a week.
Everybody,
Yeah, Rick, is there an understanding of if, does that take people through April? Some of those people were paying rent through April, and then now these people are trying to pay rent through May? Or I guess I'm wondering, is the first half of the group going to get back in line now for May or for June?
I'll confirm, but it's my understanding that it's a single application. You're not allowed to come back for an additional. We're not giving
Okay.
people multiple months. but they're probably going to get either April or May, depending on the timing. But it still is
Yeah.
just 1 month assistance.
And the upside of FERC distributing it slows it down a bit, but it really, I think, is quite useful is they really do a counseling session and work with these folks and tell them what their options are in the future. So they have other resources they refer people to for future months' rent and future months' needs. And they do a lot of mental health referrals as well. So, yeah, I'm glad everybody seems to be supportive. It's, I think, very important.
All right, everybody good with both of these, both the rent assistance, the business rent assistance extension and the other? Thumbs up, everyone, around the horn. All right. Good, good, Rick.
Yeah, I just want to make sure Erin got everything discussed that she wanted to, or her.
Yeah,
questions.
I still don't see it. And I know Shannon is resending it to me, but I haven't had a chance to look at it. And I guess my request was to have so that we can have, but I guess there was one. So that's about it. I think 1 month is great, but I don't know what people are going to do. So I'm glad we're going to talk about it again next week.
We talk about this every time we get together, if we need to. Okay, we have Breckenridge Recovery Committee update. Rick?
I don't have a whole lot. I was talking with Kelly earlier, and I was, we had been throwing around this May 8th date as a, possible milestone of seeing our retail business being expanded a little bit. Right now on retail, they can either do curbside pickup or they have the ability, if they've completed their protocol form, to allow appointments, one-on-one appointments for people to enter into a business. And that's the extent of retail. So, maybe we'll get something by it's obviously not going to be May 8th. So maybe we'll hear something as the week progresses. Another thing that I think is really important, and I think Eric will do a fantastic job of representing this, is Eric is going to be the lone mayor representative for the whole county on an advisory board that the county is putting together. And I think that they've come to the realization that these groups are just so large, and these subcommittees are almost, so your big group's 80 people, and your subcommittees are still like 25 to 30 people, and they really need to have almost a single representative from different areas with a smaller group of whatever that ends up being, 12 to 15. And so Eric is going to do that. His first meeting is tomorrow. It happens to be at 1 o'clock. The same time we'll be doing our Breck reopening. We've been calling it recovery committee, but I think Lucy's referring to it as our reopening committee. So I'm trying to use her terminology, but Kelly is our other rep on that. So hopefully she'll be joining us at 1 o'clock tomorrow for that. I think the big thing that we as local government and you as a council need to decide is this concept of closing Main Street. We can't push this off much longer if we're going to do it. The fact that if we want to do this and we want to plan for it, we need to be moving full steam ahead right now, identifying all of the issues and mapping out the strategies and everything that we need to do. And I think we need to let the reopening committee know that it's supported by the council. We've heard way more positive from people than we have negatives. I've only really heard of 1 or 2 negatives. It seems to be very much supported by the community, but I'll let you guys decide if you're hearing that. But I think we need to talk about it and give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, honestly.
Are we going to get the update next? Is that what's coming
Which update?
for the recovery committee?
Well, I'm giving there is no, I'm not sure what you're asking, Dennis. I mean, right?
Rick, I have not been part of all the conversations, so I don't know what's on the table, other than the possible closing Main Street down for the summer.
Yeah. The only other thing that's on the table is work. How do we as a group coordinate our efforts, and how do we work around what's happening at the county level? Every day we're learning something new. Today, Eric and I were in a meeting, a part of a subcommittee just prior to this one, to talk about this roadmap to recovery that was referenced earlier. The county is open to guidelines coming from groups or associations. They don't want to hear 50 different opinions from 50 different business owners, but we have a strong restaurant association. You know, we have a strong lodging association, and as organizations, they can put plans together, and those plans can either come through our reopening committee, and we will forward those on to the advisory board that Eric is setting on, who basically his job as an advisory board will be to advise the Board of Health, which is the county commissioners.
So I did not know prior to this meeting this afternoon that public health was really looking for guidance from any sector. That was sort of news to me, and I think it's great that they want that input. So, for instance, if Breck Restaurant Association comes up with some guidelines that, you know, right now we've seen guidelines from both Colorado and the National Restaurant Associations, plus some other private entities like this Black Sheep Restaurants in Hong Kong, who put out this really killer guidance booklet for their restaurants. If we get stuff like that and we can compile it through the Breck Restaurant Association, pass that to the advisory board, then that goes to the public health, and there's no other restaurant group in the county that's done anything, that very well could be the way restaurants reopen. So that's really a big deal that we didn't realize. You know, we have a really strong lodging group too, like Rick said, and I will guarantee you that between Bob Bartow, Toby Babich, and Mike Dudek, they're already working on guidance for how they're going to reopen their individual locations. And if they can, you know, coalesce around a couple ideas that can be passed on in the county, maybe we can move some of this stuff forward a little bit quicker, or if not quicker, at least with more thought behind it from those industries who do that work all the time.
So the purpose of our committee is not so much to come up with those guidance or recommendations, although we could be a resource, but it's more to have a group of people that are poised to come up with ideas, thoughts, strategies that will benefit the community, that support the principles of this community on how fast we move, how slow we move, etc. That's why we have to discuss those things, you know, as they come to you. Right now, it's very, very reactive for the most part, reacting to dates that have been put out there. Childcare, offices, you know, 50% of office staffing, limited retail, you know, the personal services. So the last time we met, we were right on the fringe of the personal services being allowed to open, nail salons, hair salons, etc., massages. That was a big deal. So, you know, we talked a little bit about what that looks like, and then we try to be a resource to help businesses navigate this process to a certain extent. So,
Rick, are you asking folks to weigh in on the closing of Main Street now? Or are we going to do that the next meeting, or what's the timeline on that?
We need to hear now, actually, how you guys feel. If it's something that's worth pursuing, allowing both the events committee, the recovery committee, or the reopening committee to push forward with some recommendations, what blocks, how to do it, tables, no tables, that kind of, I mean, there's a lot of different things involved in this. You know, that we would set some kind of timeline or they would set some kind of timeline, say 6 weeks to start or 4 weeks, knowing that if it didn't work, we could disassemble anything right away. But what I don't think we want to say is we just want to do this on weekends. I think it'd be something we'd want to do for a period of time. So really it's more about the council looking at a 30,000-foot view and saying, this is a great idea. What do you go try to make this work and come back to us with a more fleshed out plan.
Yeah.
What have been the drawbacks? Have there been any negatives that have come up?
There is one landlord that is afraid that their tenant is going to move if they don't have direct car auto access.
Parking.
Yeah, that's
For parking.
It's that's all I've heard. For the most part, I've gotten great feedback from both retail and restaurant. You know, honestly, what we're looking for is if you can't have more than, say we get to a point where you can have 50% of the people you normally have in your business. This will allow you to have a place for people to either get food and go outside and hang around, maybe have some music. It'll allow people to be able to hang out in front of a retail establishment, not being just on the sidewalk. You know, our sidewalks are pretty small in the core. This will allow people to walk all over Main Street. It'll be easier to keep 6 foot of distance. You know, I think it sort of opens up a sort of a festival atmosphere also for people that are coming up here. You know, it's just something a little different for Breckenridge. So the drawbacks, you know, traffic is always a drawback. Losing parking is always a drawback. You know, what do we do with the alcohol portion of it? I know that the state does have some guidance as far as getting a liquor license that the town would probably allow then, but you would have to restrict it to an area. So a business could have some tables outside, but they would have to sort of cordon them off so that they could be, you know, watched. It wouldn't be a, you know, like an Oktoberfest where people just walk wherever they want. You'd be sort of, you know, you would be stuck where you buy your stuff. So whoever did that kind of thing would have a little patio area. I mean, you've probably seen these in other areas in, you know, other ski towns have done this stuff. Like Park City does something like this.
With the liquor laws, and I've talked to somebody recently about whether or not it's possible, and I don't know if we can do this as a town or not, but if somebody has like a parking area or like certain areas, like you said, outside their restaurant or near their restaurant and expand that liquor license out there, I mean, is there anything that we can do to help facilitate that?
Yeah, Helen, do you want to?
Sure. Yes, that is allowed. If it's a private parking area, they'd have to expand their liquor license into that area through a modification of premises. It's something that's done. They would just need permission from whoever the landowner is. And in the case of the Main Street closure, we would be giving them certain businesses that are on Main Street, potentially the ability to expand their licenses out into the street area under our permission.
So
I prefer
this is the stuff we don't know yet that we have to figure out.
Okay.
Because it's called a sidewalk service permit, but it actually says that the area has to be contiguous to the liquor establishment, and it's really ideally designed to go out into public sidewalk areas. So we don't want to block sidewalk access. We have to make sure that we can just create, you know, we can extend the service area across the sidewalk into the roadway also, so we keep it contiguous, and you know, but still allow access across that service area via the sidewalk. And those are details that we have to explore.
Right.
If we block off the sidewalk. But if we close the road, then blocking off the sidewalk wouldn't be a problem.
Right. And these are all sort of.
You don't want to create a zigzag.
These are the technical details that we want to, you know, the working group to sort of work on. It's really more for you to say, this is a great idea. Let's go ahead and give the authority to at least move forward. The recovery or the reopening group may say, you know what, in the end, we found out that this just doesn't work. So maybe it doesn't, but you know, think of this from 30,000 foot. Don't think of all the potential, you know, issues. We'll let them deal with that. Let's just decide either up or down if you're willing to give this a try.
Yeah, I will echo that. I'm a big picture guy, but I think, you know, we've been talking about this for years and thinking about, doing closing Main Street, but then we couldn't because it was a state highway, and now that's not an issue. I think now would be a good time to try it, just because what do we have to lose? And I do think we have a fair amount to gain on this, certainly initially. And again, I have no idea how we'd do it, but I would let greater minds than mine try to figure out a schematic to make this thing work, and let's give it a try. But I do think we should do it, but not forever, but for an extended period of time, not weekends. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off and see how it works. And yeah, I think this would be a good learning experience. And I think the downside is very minimum and the upside is large.
Gary?
Are you saying not weekends or not just weekends?
Do it
No.
7 days a week.
7 days a week.
Yeah.
Jeffrey?
Yeah.
I mean, Gary?
Yeah, I'm in. The bad news is we have a pandemic. The good news is we have a pandemic, and it's really good. It gives people an opportunity to really begin to experiment, and it may well lead to new normals. So I'm in.
Dennis?
If not now, when? I love the idea of giving the committee the latitude to explore this and go, here's what we came up with. Let's see what we can do.
Dick?
Yes.
Yeah, I really like it as well. I think it's a great opportunity to give it a try. We've talked about it forever. A couple broad thoughts, because I agree with you, Eric. I think the committee should drill down to the details. But so far as blocking sidewalk and that kind of thing, the broad overruling concept in my mind that should be there is you don't want to do anything that's going to hurt your neighbor's business. So, so that would be kind of a broad overview thing. As far as the liquor license goes, I really like the idea of allowing those restaurants on Main Street to expand and their liquor license, expand their liquor license premises, which, like Eric said, would have to be controlled, because it allow them to have, maybe get to 60 or 70% occupancy. It's still not going to get them to 100 with proper social distancing. It'd also be, a nice experience to be a festive atmosphere and such. There are some in town pushing for, and Helen, you might have to help me, but there is a license that some have gotten in Denver. I forget what it's called, where it's just general consumption all over Main Street, in a group of different businesses, and they can all sell drinks and they all commingle and such.
It's
like
an
the market and such.
entertainment district license.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm not in favor of that. I think that would create more problems than benefits. So I'm more in favor of allowing the individual restaurants to control certain areas and allow their liquor license to expand into those controlled certain areas. So the entertainment district, I think, it'll be a careful what you wish for kind of thing. It's so yeah, great idea. I'm all for it.
Aaron?
I'm all for it. I think the more we can embrace the new normal and be outside, the better. I think there's another component of this of how safe people feel, because I think some people might not feel safe going into a restaurant, and then this would allow them that dining experience and for our restaurants to have the same business, or some business. So I think it's great. The more we can think out of the box like this, the better.
Thank you. Kelly?
I agree with everything that's said, and I do agree with Dick's point about, I don't know, I guess I would call them the beer garden kind of type thing. And my concern is if we just have tables on Main Street where people are eating and then leaving, I have a real sanitation concern about that. So I feel much better about having the tables inside the beer garden where the restaurant can be in control and sanitizing after every use.
All right.
One last comment, Eric?
Yeah, please, Dick.
Think of all the summer puffies that our outdoor folks can sell.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Summer what?
There's a huge upside.
Summer
Puffy.
puffy. You have one.
Oh.
Oh yeah.
So, Rick, that'll give you some guidance to give to the rec reopening crew tomorrow to start on the discussions. Let's move to the town hall reopening plans.
Yeah, I just want to give you a brief update of kind of what our general plan is as what we're looking to do. And primarily, when people enter town hall, the majority of the time, it's probably something in ComDev right now. other than meetings or things like that that they're attending which aren't occurring in there. We feel that we have a pretty good process in place that's meeting the needs of our builders and developers, but it's not sustainable for too long, but we're not in a huge hurry just to open our doors up. So starting next Monday, May 11th, we'll be doing appointments. So people can make an appointment with a staff person. They would meet them at the front door, allow them to enter the building, and escort them to wherever they're meeting. We've put plexiglass guards up on the some of our public counter areas. So if they're meeting, once they allow, let's say they allow a contractor to enter, he needs to meet to go over some plans or do something that they can't do electronically. They would escort that person. They must be masked up. They would escort them to ComDev. We have a plexiglass shield now that creates, that little bit of safety guard between the employee and that person. Only one person at a time would be in an area for a meeting. So we're going to do that. We're going to do appointments for a couple weeks, and then our goal to actually unlock and open town hall would probably be May 25th is what we're targeting right now. Certainly we can do that sooner if the need arises or we feel that we need to, but those are our tentative plans. And as we move to that, each week we're looking at how we safely add additional people back into the workplace. But there will be a new norm for us for a while too, but still allow us to meet the needs of the community. So that's what we got.
Do you guys have a lot of hand sanitizer all around town hall?
Well, not really, because there's not that many people in here right now. But Scott Reed did text me that we can get hand sanitizer. Most hand sanitizer is going to come in bulk, and we can get it for $60 a gallon, which he says is cheaper than we can manufacture it. But the problem is we've got to be able to put it into smaller containers. So I think, we can talk about what that looks like. I think we want to work with BTO a little bit and see if, if we're buying bulk, if a business had their own, can they come refill it for a nominal fee, to fill their container or something like that. I think we need to talk about.
All details to be fleshed out. Everybody good on the reopening of town hall?
Yep.
Yes.
Thanks, Rick. How about an update on the March tax returns?
All right, we're going to bring Brian in, and he's going to give you that.
All right, Brian.
Hello. So we ran latest numbers for March just this morning, and it came in fairly close to what we predicted. It right now, with still some missing returns, but we think we're pretty close, is down 51.7%, so 52% down. We had forecast just really based on the calendar that it would be down 50%. Now there's some variations in there between sectors as you would imagine, and we can get this out to you after the meeting. But retail, for example, was down almost exactly as the whole at 51%. Marijuana 56%, but that's not a big dollar volume. Restaurant and bar is down 60. Short-term lodging also down 60, but grocery and liquor was only down 20%. And again, that's with roughly half the month functionally closed. And construction was only down 8.5%. But 2019 was a relatively low year. But those are the numbers, excuse me. Those are the numbers we're seeing for March. So it came in pretty close to what we had forecast. Revenue-wise, it's tough to really extrapolate because of all the different categories and accommodations in there. But you're probably looking at about a $4.5 to $5 million hit to the excise fund on that basis. That's a pretty rough estimate, but that's what we looked at through the month of March. And what we're going to do as we move into the next discussion about forecasting for the rest of the year, we're going to use this information to try to come up with a better base level amount of activity as you'll see, we estimated 90% decrease for April and May, based really on just kind of a, just guessing that there's still going to be some churn from, grocery type business, liquor, things like that. But with this information, we can maybe get a better fix on that. But those changes, those percentage changes from, let's say, we maybe say, oh, it's 20% instead of, well, I should say 80% down instead of 90% down, aren't going to make a huge impact in terms of the forecasting in terms of dollars. But we're always looking at, taking the results that we get and trying to get closer in terms of our projections. So that's the information for March. And like I said, it's really kind of hot off the presses. So I'll get that to Rick after the meeting, and then he can distribute to you guys if you want to see it.
Excellent. Question about March? No, let's move right into the future budget reduction planning process.
Okay. As you see in the packet, what we've been doing is revising our projections for the rest of the year really very frequently, almost daily, trying to take a look at what are the trends in terms of our net taxable sales, what are we seeing in terms of revenue downturns being forecast by a tourism agency, all kinds of information, and then also just anecdotal information locally. So the memo starts off by talking about where we were. Back in late March, we made some estimates about where we thought we would be in terms of the near-term future, and then also extrapolating revenue losses all the way out to December. That information, that we used for that report, obviously, is about a month old, which right now is really a long time in terms of how quickly things are changing. So what we've done now is we've updated for year to date in terms of what we've already received. Now we can project all the way through March based on actual information instead of purely forecasting. We've also taken a better look at RET in terms of putting into the bank, if you will, what we've already received for RET, and then assuming going forward a 75% decrease to that revenue stream. And then we've reached out to title companies which aren't really seeing a huge slowdown yet. So we may have another month of being okay in RET, but that's something we can monitor daily since we just received that right in town hall. So I don't want to, I won't go through the whole memo, but we also talked about the budget cuts that you see in the memo that senior leadership went through and performed, based on what we could take out of our 2020 budgets. That also went through to our partner organizations, and there's actually some substantial savings there. In particular, the Breckenridge Historical Association gave us back about $1.2 million for capital projects. So there was some real program savings in the partner organization area. So when we that's another difference from what we saw when we did this report back in March, is you saw those budget cuts, but they weren't in the sheet yet. They weren't in the projection. And as the memo says, if you'll recall, that projection had us like $300,000 to the good in terms of net fund balance projection. But in looking back at it again, I recall the estimate that I kind of came up with for December was a 20% decrease in budget in December, which sounds crazy today. But a month ago, it seemed like, hey, maybe this thing will kind of pass. So that's why we're looking at this thing all the time. Like, when I opened it back up, like we looked at it, I was like 20% down in December. I sure hope so, but we can't plan on that. So that is the kind of information that we revised for the projection you see on page 3 of the memo, the revenue impacts model. And there's a lot of numbers on there. So let me just kind of walk you through it. What we did was find kind of our break-even point, if you will. Rick wanted us to do an analysis that showed what kind of decrease can we absorb and still be near that break-even point. This way we kind of have a number to keep an eye on as we go forward. And if we're above or below that number, which if you look on that right side table, the net taxable sales projections table, you'll see lands right around, 65.5% exactly is where it lands. And we end up, functionally break even in our net balance forecast. And I hope, council will recall, how we work to that net balance forecast. You'll recall the reserves that we do, the CIP reserves and things like that. So that's what we're talking about when we say break even. We're not talking about break even for 2020. We're going to, take a lot of money out of the bank in 2020, but our fund balance projection after all the reserves is still kind of break even, assuming we get to the 65.5% loss level. Anything over that is a different discussion. Anything under it is a different discussion. You can also see there the 90% estimated decreases for April and May I just talked about. We'll tweak those a little bit going forward as we get more information, but unless there's a major change there, it's not really going to change the conversation. So the thing that gets a little confusing is if we assume the 65.5% loss going forward, since we had a pretty good January and February, which is ironic enough now, and then March being down 50%, if you then go to the 90-90 and then the 65.5 going out after that, you end up basically at 50% of your projected revenue from the 2020 budget. So there's kind of two numbers at work there, 65.5%, and then where does that land you? Right around 50% of what you budgeted. So I hope that makes sense. It just gets a little confusing where you're like, oh, I thought you said 65. Right, but when you just do it for that part of the year, that's where you land. RET, if you do that assumption I talked about, kind of coincidentally, lands at 49% as well. And that's putting in the bank what we already have, which is all the way through April, and then assume 75% loss for what's left, May through June. So if you take that chunk out of what we have left to collect, you also land at 49%, which is actually just a coincidence. So that's not like the same assumption for those two revenue lines. So once we do all that, then we look at our revenue reduction of 17 million bucks. And that's why you'll see that excise fund balance as we drop down now to the fund balance table. You'll see excise fund is down to 4 million bucks. Down from when we were at the budget retreat, we were talking in the dozens, $12, $13 million fund balance. Now it's important to note that we've got time. We bought time, you could say the rest of 2020, with the measures we've put in place already. The budget cuts that are detailed in the memo, and those include things like I had mentioned, the BHA give back of, 1 million bucks. We also nixed a land acquisition, an open space land acquisition that council will recall we were planning on in 2020. That was going to have a $6 million impact to general fund. So we're able to put that money back in the general fund. So when you talk about the low hanging fruit, the stuff that we did to get through 2020, there was a lot of it. And I just forgot to mention, we also did the exercise of moving things around in the 5-year CIP. And that had a major $5.5 million downward impact in that reserve. You'll recall the construction reserve we do for next 3 years CIP projects. So we went over that pretty early in this process, and that yielded another $5.5 million bucks. So that kind of gets us treading water for the rest of 2020, assuming we're around that 65% decrease number. A little more, a little less, it will still be okay. We'll be close to what we're talking about now. But that's kind of your Mendoza line, if you will, use a baseball term. So it's important to note that as we go into 2021, based on what we see in the rest of 2020, it's going to be a different conversation. There's not 5.5 million bucks in the CIP to move. There's still stuff to move in there, but getting to that kind of number to buy more time will be more difficult. A lot of what's left in there is, we have the debt service reserve for the garage, parking structure, and the broadband. That's separate. But council already, made some hard decisions, had a great conversation, but the conversation is much harder the second time around. When we go to our partner organizations, there's no, Milne Park for 1.2 million bucks to give back. They gave it back. So it's kind of a good news, bad news thing where it's like 2020, we've got our number. We will be truing that up daily. Leslie and her team are looking at this stuff, daily. So we will keep coming back with what that number is as information comes in. But it's important to keep in mind, you look at 2020 and it's like, gee, we're almost kind of break even here. Like we're kind of okay. It's like, well, we had some major budget savings that were, you could really say, the low hanging fruit. And there's not a ton of that stuff, 7-figure type stuff left laying around. So
just everybody in the public understands, Brian, we do have a council policy reserve that's about $26 million that we do not touch. There's another $13 million that's required by Tabor for us to keep. So when Brian is throwing these numbers around, don't just, when you're sitting out in the audience, don't just think we only have $5 million sitting in the bank at the end of this. We really have considerably more that are just some are policies, some are legal requirements that we keep this money aside for a rainy day, which happens to be pouring outside. So,
yeah, that's correct, Eric. And just forgive me, the Tabor reserve is actually about 1.9 million.
Oh yeah, sorry, 1.9 for Tabor. That's the general fund, right? And then we have the capital reserve.
Correct. That capital reserve is still in there at about $7 million, a little bit less than that. So that still represents projects that are out there in the future. So I don't mean to say there's nothing left to move around in that CIP, but that is that number, that capital reserve number that's been lowered. The general fund operations reserve that was always meant to represent a third of the year, 4 months, is still at $8 million. And this analysis does not have us touching that. Again, we found this, I think, very useful number that Rick wanted us to find, which is 65%. We start seeing that number higher or lower beginning in June, then we'll know a little more. But who the heck knows what we'll be talking about in June. But right now, we've got a number to kind of zero in on, keep an eye on. We're also sensitive to the fact that the timing of our reports has a big delay in it because of the state money. Well, I should say the county money that comes through the state. But Leslie and her team are putting together analytical procedures and looking at the returns as they come in and seeing what percentage haven't come in yet and things like that to get this information out faster. So we can't speed it up too much, but we can be a little more timely with saying, hey, here's how, going forward, here's how May looked in April and things like that. So
I want to make a couple points on this. I just want to make sure everybody understands the impact model that you're looking at today that has the 65% allows us to absorb up to 65% loss for the remaining months. Includes what we call the tier 1 cuts. So when you look at that sheet, that second sheet in the packet, and you had tier 1 reduction, those are the ones that we ran by you at the bottom. They total 5.2 million. So those are set in stone now in our revised 2020 budget. Those have been implemented, and that's what allows us to do the 65. The additional exercise we just completed was asking staff to look at what other areas might you go in and trim even more. And as you can imagine, they trim so much, there's only about, 774,000 left for tier 2. That has not, those have not been implemented yet. Those are in our back pocket. That's some of what we can do if we see that 65% number trending differently. And we have to kind of look at some anecdotal stuff because, by the time we get the good information, the year's almost over with. So, that's what we'll do. And I think what we call, what Gary referred to as the black swan, the tier 3 is an exercise that we're continuing to do, but that's the one that will dip into personnel. There's no way around it because, personnel accounts for about $15 million of our town budget. So you just do the math. For every 10% reduction, you're shaving, 1.5, somewhere in that ballpark with benefits and, wages, et cetera, off of that. So, but for every one of those things you do, it has a direct impact on the service level that we're able to deliver to the community. But those are hard decisions that we'll have to make if, depending on how this goes, and we have to remain fluid. We have to monitor, and we will definitely have to go into approaching our 2021 budget way different than we did during the Great Recession. This is much more challenging than what we went through back then. As you recall, we didn't see the hits that we anticipated we were going to see back then, but we're definitely going to see the hits here. So as we prepare 2021, it's going to be that budget, which actually starts, in a couple months. There will be there'll be some different conversations, I think.
Any questions for Rick or Brian? Black Swan, how do you feel about this?
Me?
You're the Black Swan, buddy.
I think the analysis to date is a good one, and I think Rick and Brian have put it very well, which is 2021 is going to be a very, very big challenge. I mean, what we've created now with a 65% diminishment in revenues, quite frankly, says you don't have to touch your reserves. And as Brian pointed out, the way we got there was because we had some big savings on some very big ticket items, which we don't have available anymore. So, 2021, unless we see a huge pickup in the fall, which I don't know, I don't think so, but we'll see, will cause us to have some very, very hard discussions. It's probably starting late summer.
Very good. Thanks, Gary. Any other?
So I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So is there an opportunity to get to this, to go to this tier 2 early in order to preserve jobs next year?
The tier 2 savings, budget and program reductions that you see on page 2 are already in that analysis, and they've already been put in place. They're already enacted.
They've already been put in place. Okay.
That's correct.
Other questions? Other than a general state of depression, how's everybody feel about the analysis?
Bleak.
Aaron?
But it is what it is.
It's helpful.
The good news is we've got good people focusing on this earlier rather than later, so we don't end up doing some Chinese fire drills, that we really can begin to anticipate. If this happens, here's what we have to do. If that happens, that's what we're going to have to do. And that's the way that's the way an organization should run itself.
Also, I'd say the good
Agreed.
news is we had the wherewithal and some of the reserves to put $1.5 million to try to keep our small businesses and our employees on life support. And if we didn't have good people and a good economy up to that point, that wouldn't have been a possibility. So it is what it is. I'm not going to drink till we get off the air.
You were going to say something? Dick, you were going to say something?
Yeah, a couple comments. To Jeff, just piggybacking on Jeffrey's comments, that 1.5 was, in my view, an investment in our brand. I mean, it's an investment in people, which is huge, but it's also an investment in our brand. We've got to keep our small business community as healthy as we possibly can, and that includes the workforce, because they're nothing without workforce. So, that 1.5 was well spent, and frankly, I'm prepared and not 100% confident we'll get there. But if we had to look for another 100,000 or a couple of 100,000 to support those efforts again, a week, a month from now, I'm prepared to look at it. Who knows if we can. The next cuts are hard. They're really hard. Gary said it, Brian said it, and it's very, very helpful to have that 65% number. So we know where we are month to month to month. So yeah, these are hard numbers to work with, but I think it's a good analysis.
I think that June's not, I think we're going to see worse in June, but we'll
Yeah, I
probably
do.
see better in July. So, I think all being equal, some of this stuff will even out as we go along. And then, the fall is just a crapshoot right now. So we'll have to see how, we take this in 3-month chunks right now, I think is the, as far as our job, why Brian and Rick look at it every day.
Yeah, I was gonna say 3-day chunks and then 3-month chunks. You're absolutely right.
Other comments? Great job, Brian and Rick, of course, with the analysis and the hard decisions. I think you guys have done an awesome job. Other matters? Anyone?
Oh,
Go ahead, Kelly.
okay. I've got a couple of other matters. One that I just think the council should be aware of, and it's obviously going to be something that we're going to be looking at closely as a child care group. But right now, they're still doing numbers of, it looks like 2 to 10 or 1 to 10 kids. And so I think that's going to be a real burden for our workforce this year. Camp numbers are just not going to be what they normally are. I'm not sure what the ratios at the rec center usually are, but it's far higher than 1 to 10. So I don't know if people have out of the box ideas or, if you do have any ideas, please come to me. Oh, Rick.
Rick's got an idea.
Good. Solve it, Rick. Go.
So, there's a countywide committee that had a meeting. I think, was it yesterday, Eric? They said.
Yeah.
Diane McBride out of Frisco and our rec center staff and Silverthorne meeting to discuss strategies for summer camps, and we brought it up at the meeting today. We said this is something that's going to be critical and important to getting the employees back to work, and they want to submit a kind of reopening plan into the county. So they sounded very confident that they have some strategies that I think will provide for a safe environment. But those numbers may not be a lot better than you're describing, because that is going to be a challenge, right? If you're really considering safety.
So we're gonna have to play it by ear, obviously, and see what kind of effort that these camps can bring along. So
yeah,
And
but it might take some
they-
smart scheduling by employers and things like
Absolutely.
that. So
Yeah.
just make sure you guys stay very aware of this is just another hardship that our employees are facing.
And Kelly and Rick, with those parameters, are they thinking of keeping kids 6 feet away from each other? Is that?
If you just go
I
through
just-
the
it's hard for
Hollywood
me to wrap my
neighborhood,
head
there
around
is
it.
not one kid that's exercising physical distancing. So.
Yeah.
Hey, I resent that comment. We're doing our best.
I'm just
Kelly, what else
glad.
do you have?
I'm glad you're keeping the kids physically distanced from me.
We're keeping our neighborhood physically distanced from Jeffrey. Wait, before Jeffrey,
ahead,
before
Kelly.
you
No,
go,
no,
I do have another thing. So I wanted to put out there with all the discussion of budgeting, I really, really want to make sure that we keep, this year we gave 100,000 to Building Hope. And I think that we absolutely need to plan for at least that much for next year. And I talked to Jen, and they have, some studies about pandemics and how when the becomes greatest, and we're nowhere near that point right now, and they're already serving as many in a week as they were in some of their months last year. So I don't want to lose sight of that. I think it's really important to our community that we fund that, or give a portion of funds to that, and I certainly want to give at least as much as we gave this year. I know that might come at the expense of something else, but I think that we should keep that on the forefront of our minds.
Kelly, I'm still hoping that we can be reimbursed by the federal government for some of the grant programs that we've done so far. That 1.5 million, and if it's probably a long shot, so don't get too psyched up about it. But if we do get that $1.5 million back, I would think that what we would want to do is utilize that for community-related programming, like Building Hope, like childcare, like potentially more rent assistance going into the fall. So, if we can look at that amount of money, if we can recoup that money from the federal government, it'd be great for us to put that aside to use it for things like this. So I'm all on board.
Okay, so one last thing is I wanted to applaud you guys for opening the skate park. It sounds like I didn't personally experience it, but my family did, and they had a great time, and it seemed like a really good I'm having a really important discussion with my coworker. But I have heard from, and I think part of the point of reopening the skate park is that not everybody wants to ride a bike and not everyone wants to go for a hike. And I have been hearing a lot about the rec center, and is there any capacity or situation that we could look at? There are people who are doing rehab that can't do it, or who have other health burdens that make it so that they can't do. Oh, Rick has more. Good. Solve it again, Rick.
Go ahead, Rick. This is not good news.
On May 11th, Avalanche is opening up to start physical therapy back in there again. Good. On May 11th. I believe on May 11th, we're also starting one-on-one personal training, because it's allowed under the personal services. So via appointment, they'll be able to, have a personal trainer work through them. So that's about as far right now as we can push what's allowed with health. Rec center will be one of the last things to get to open, because it's identified as a high-risk activity. So
I definitely understand that, and I don't want to put employees at risk for sure, but I do appreciate that maybe there's a limited opportunity there. So thanks so much for staying up with that.
And Scott just texted me and said that Avalanche is open now. So
Very good. There you go.
I was wrong there. They, you know what? They correct me really quick.
You do. It's awesome. That's what you want.
Correct.
That's good. Hey, can I go back to the mask for a minute?
Yes, Gary.
I think we all recognize that wearing a face mask is going to be around for a while. Could be around for quite a long while. And since we're going to be ordering, Rick went out with 12,000, let's call it tens of thousands of masks. Might we want to do something that makes it kind of neat and cool, like design the mask ourselves with, Town of Breckenridge with, some neat design? Sort of the way we did on the, plastic bags, where we really used it as a,
I like it.
as a branding. When people went back home, people would say, "Hey, where'd you get that bag? That's Town of Breckenridge." I mean, maybe it costs a few more cents per mask, but if we're going to be doing so many of them anyway, it'd be kind of neat to have something cool, not just something generic. Just a thought.
Yeah.
It's a good thought.
The lower part of
Good idea.
Jeffrey's face, so everybody could look like Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Smiling.
Exactly. Hey, we get a couple of questions, Eric. I didn't know if you want to deal with that. Then I have one last thing to add.
I'll get to the questions at the end. Aaron next, and then I'll go to you, Jeffrey.
No, I don't have it. Well, now I have one. Will the masks be washable, reusable?
The masks that we buy will probably be the 3-ply paper masks that look like these, these ones.
Right.
They're
Okay.
sort of single use. You can use them for a couple days, but without a doubt, they fall apart. So
Because the next step would also be messaging to throw away your mask. Because I've seen complaints about gloves and masks and things like that too. We've talked about it, I'm sure, but
gloves is
that might need to be out there too.
Yeah. We will definitely need to message some mask protocol. But I would assume that our retail community will totally jump on board like Emma did at at the
Yeah.
Mom's
Mama's
Bakery.
bacon.
I mean, they cranked out a ton of masks. I'm sure you will see a bunch of that going on. And sort of to Gary's point, I don't even know if we're going to have to do that. I got a feeling that there will be retail people in town that are going to put out, you know, Breckenridge masks, Moose, whatever. So,
Good.
Magical
Yeah.
Scraps has them now.
oh yeah, that's right. Magical Scraps does too. So there are two places that we're doing them. Jeffrey, what did you have?
You know, not just an observation and a request. I've been looking at the number of participants, anywhere between 100 and 130 people care enough to watch this thing. And I think you can see all of us, we're hanging on by the skin of our teeth, trying to just keep this community we love vibrant and have it survive through this new reality. So I just ask everybody that's watching and everyone that's watching that knows people to just kind of suggest that all of us become ambassadors for the community. Try to keep a positive attitude. Don't be dicks, and just try to keep that the good vibes flowing. And I'm as guilty as anybody else, but be a better person than I am generally, and be good people, good citizens, and good neighbors. And we will get through this, and we're a whole hell of a lot better than most of the people in the United States, in the world, going through this stuff. So yeah, power to the people, and yeah, let's do it.
Thanks, Jeffrey. That's great. Dick?
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, Jeffrey, so well said. Under the hope category, I've had some folks approach me with some killer ideas. This 65% number that's so scary with the budget, we as a community have some control over that, and how creative we are in driving our own business and supporting our own community and shopping local. And all of these things are so paramount and so much more important now. There were ideas of Takeout Tuesday, which grew into, have a online video station where we have local musicians, where you can tip them through Venmo or whatever online, so they're starving too, right? And then maybe we grow it into the arts community, and it becomes galleries, and grow it into the retail community. And if we can get behind, I'm going to kick this by the BTO and the events committee tomorrow. But some of these efforts, if we as a community can really get behind them and support each other, and we can control our own destiny to a certain extent. And there is going to be no silver bullet. So all of these things that we can do, and to Jeffrey's point, is starting with being kind, is just so important for the success and where we're going to be 2 years from now.
Nicely said, Dick. Good job.
Anyone
Eric, you're
else?
muted.
We're good? All right. I want to thank everybody that listened in. Great turnout again. I got a couple final questions. Encourage buy local and hire local. Absolutely. We always push that one. And we had a question about the parking garage. We will be talking about the parking garage at our next meeting on the 26th. No, we won't.
26.
Yeah, next meeting on the 26th. Yeah. I don't know, are we having a meeting? We do have a meeting on the 12th. That's next week. The parking garage will be the following meeting, the 26th. Thanks for that correction, Rick.
Eric, just so people know, our normal work sessions while we're in this virtual mode probably won't be starting at 3 o'clock. So what we do is we compile the agenda, we see how much time we take, and then we adjust accordingly so that we finish close to the time of 7 p.m. Generally, I'm going to guess work sessions are going to start somewhere between 4 and 5 p.m. And we'll put that information out by the end of this week, but it will no longer be 3 p.m. for a period of time.
Excellent. Thank you, Rick. So thanks to the community, and a special thanks to the council for all the work. It's been rough, but you guys have done an amazing job, and I thank you for it. And with that, we are adjourned.